Yeah.
Doesn't matter when it's for.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Derek Muller. I am the Public Information Coordinator for Montgomery Township. And on behalf of the partnership, of the Business Development Partnership at Montgomery Township, we welcome you to this presentation with Daniel Nemiroff from SEPTA. Dan will be speaking to us about the Forward Bus Revolution program, which does not offer specific solutions for getting back to normalcy from COVID, but does provide solutions for efficiency in the SEPTA system, which we can all agree helps people get around to work and other important places in their life. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Dan. And Dan, thanks for doing this for us.
Oh, no, anytime. Let me just pull it up. Is it? All right. Does everyone see the screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. So as Derek said, my name is Dan Nemiroff. I'm the manager of planning programs at SEPTA, and I'm here to talk about SEPTA Forward Bus Revolution, which is the authority's first bus network redesign project. We kicked it off in May, so we're really in the early phases of the project, and we just started our in-person engagement about a week and a half ago, through a series of pop-up events and that kind of thing. So I'm excited to be here today to tell you, give you kind of a broad overview of the project, talk about some very sort of preliminary findings, and then talk about some of our engagement strategies. We've been doing a lot of these. We were calling them listening sessions. We've been doing them with community groups, advocacy organizations, that kind of thing. So, I'm happy to have questions. I'm, happy to, have a conversation. I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. As Derek said, we are not in the recommendations phase of our project at this point. We're really in the sort of analysis and existing conditions phase. With that, I'll kind of give it a start. So I'm going to provide, a project overview, some draft findings of our state of the system and market analysis reports, as well as a little bit of information about ridership. I'm going to talk about our engagement. And then, like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions, or try to answer any questions that you have, and talk further after the presentation. Before I get into the actual nuts and bolts of Bus Revolution, I do want to sort of send a shout out to our strategic plan, SEPTA Forward. We updated our strategic plan last year, and it was, I think, it was more ambitious than our typical strategic plans, and we sort of are trying to take our current system, which is pretty siloed, and amongst the modes, and put together one lifestyle transit network. You might have read over the last few weeks about rail transit unification. We have a lot of sort of rail-based modes, the Broad Street, the Market Frankfurt line, some trolley routes. We're trying to bring them all under one umbrella, improve wayfinding, improve communication, and that's the sort of the SEPTA Metro plan that you may have read a little bit about. There's this project, Bus Network Redesign, which is about updating and modernizing and creating a more effective bus network for the entire region. And then there's ultimately, that later this year, pretty soon you'll be hearing some information about the Regional Rail Master Plan, which will put together a long-term vision for regional rail. We have an amazing regional rail network. It's the envy of many other agencies, but it does need we need to make some changes to integrate it with some of the other modes, and to sort of update it into a more useful network. On to the project overview. So I just want to start real quick by clarifying what this project is. Bus Revolution is a comprehensive rethinking of our entire bus network. It's a reimagining, a restructuring, and a redesigning of it in the city and the suburbs. All aspects of service provision are on the table: routes, stops, the streets we run on, schedules, route numbers, the different types of service we provide within the context of bus service, as well as our service standards, our processes, and our guidelines. We're really trying to take a step back and look at all aspects of bus service, which is our largest mode. We have about 122 bus routes. It's about more than half of our ridership, more than half of our revenue. The analysis and outreach will be done in a 3-year timeline. Years 1 and 2 are focused on analysis and engagement, and the year 3, being 2023, would focus on implementation. And these projects, which are I wouldn't say typical, but are something that a lot of other transit agencies were doing, particularly pre-COVID. MTA in New York is in the middle of a huge one. Borough by borough, they are very focused on implementation. It's not something you write. You don't write a report and put it on a shelf. Everything is geared towards what is feasible within sort of a 3-year timeline. Beyond that, people lose interest, you lose momentum, that kind of thing. Also, these projects are typically budget neutral. They're done within the confines of an agency's sort of surface transit or bus transit footprint. So we're not adding service. We're not removing service. We are using the same number of service hours. We're using the same, sort of the same number of vehicles, and we basically it's a massive reallocation of resources. But like I said, we're not cutting service, or not cutting service hours, etc. We might remove routes and reallocate those hours. We might do other things, but we're keeping the footprint essentially the same. A project like this, obviously, it sort of compresses like a ton of work into about a 2-year frame, and this is sort of a very high level look at what the different technical pieces are and how engagement matches up with them. So right now, like I said, we're in the existing conditions work phase, so it's like 1 and 2. So the state of the system report, which is sort of how we're doing. It's looking at how the region is moving around, where the region is going, and how SEPTA lines up with that, how our bus network specifically lines up with that. It's about looking at the region sort of and seeing what parts of the region that are good, are sort of right markets for better transit, and where we could potentially gain some ridership. It's also looking at what areas we may be overserving, and that kind of thing. That work is complemented by this yellow box, which is evaluate individual bus routes. So we create profiles for each of our 122 bus routes, and we look at ridership, we look at speed, we look at schedule adherence, and that kind of thing. And then we take that work and we combine it with all this engagement we're doing, and we start developing ideas for improvements, and we create packages of different scenarios, which we then present to the public and get more feedback on which ideas and which things that they like, which ones they don't like. And then from there, we start crafting our final recommendations, and then we begin implementation, and there's still iteration there. So again, this is years 1 and 2, like 2021 and 2022 are going to be focused on analysis and sort of this back and forth with these different scenarios and ideas. And then 2023 is going to be focused on implementation. Some early findings of our market analysis. So as you can probably imagine, transit tends to be more successful in areas with greater population density. This is why we have so much more service in the city than we do elsewhere, because it's more dense. When there's a lot of people in a little space, the draw to alternative mobility is greater. So transit tends to be more successful in those places. So density is highest in the city, and it drops off outside the city, although there are parts of our suburban, parts of our counties that do have some population density. However, density by itself is not the only barometer that we are using. So I don't expect you to kind of see all of these maps, but I can kind of walk you through them. They each look at 3 different populations that have a higher propensity of using transit. On your left are race and ethnicity. Areas with high Black populations, they tend to generate higher numbers of transit use. Black people are more likely to use transit. Asian people are more likely to use transit. So that is on the left. In the middle are zero-car households, areas where there are families that have 0 cars. They tend to use transit more often, as you could probably imagine. And then finally, on the right is distribution of low-income residents, neighborhoods, parts of the region where there are higher numbers of lower income residents. They tend to generate higher numbers of transit users. So population density is important, but you have to look at density with some of these other factors to gauge sort of really how much transit use is possible in a certain area. And we use that information, we create this transit propensity index. So again, those experiencing poverty are proportionally more likely to ride the bus. Black residents are more likely to ride, those of mixed race households, Hispanic residents, Asian residents, and those with one vehicle in their household. They sort of match the demographics of the SEPTA area. Areas with large percentages of white residents and those not living in poverty, those areas do not generate as much transit use. It's pretty straightforward, but we want to make sure that what we're doing is specific to our region and isn't just sort of a one size fits all approach. But then it's not just this. Employment is also a really big factor with transit use. Obviously, people getting on the bus in one location is one aspect of a trip, but where are they going? Where do they need to go, et cetera? So we also factor in employment density by industry types, because certain industry types are more likely to generate transit use. Service jobs, warehouse jobs, et cetera. So this map shows you sort of those pieces, and I apologize, the scale's probably not great, but we can send them out afterwards. You can see the city, within the city and sort of just outside the city is the highest sort of match density between, sort of these transit populations that have higher numbers of transit propensity combined with employment. So you can see in this, you can see sort of a network building out of, you have the city, which has the densest, but then sort of along some of our regional rail lines, you can see that there are higher numbers of sort of transit, friendly areas. And what this map is showing are the levels of transit frequency that these areas can support. So the reddest red is like 5 minutes. So that's not to say all these areas will have 5 minutes or all their services will run every 5 minutes. It's just that they could theoretically support it. But you see a lot of our suburban areas that also have good, 15, 20, 30 minute, densities of employment and population that could support, transit. So I think you're starting to see through this map, like where we can probably line up transit service and where we can make improvements. I'll talk a little bit about ridership now. So before the pandemic, ridership was in decline. Between 2014 and 2019, bus ridership fell by 13%. 2016 is showing a little bump, but after that, we started dropping pretty precipitously. So we were losing ridership before the pandemic. And this is important to note because, our bus ridership peaked in about 2013. And ever since then, we've been kind of slowly declining. And we started looking at this project pre-COVID. I want to say we started making the case for it internally around 2016. Like I said, we had never done this before. We've long had a process in SEPTA called the annual service plan that allowed us to make incremental changes, small things nibbling around the edges, sometimes bigger things. But we never really took a step back and looked at things comprehensively. And I think it's something that, frankly, all authorities should do on a regular basis, 3 years, 5 years. I think there should always be, a desire to sort of look at everything and really gauge how we're doing. And you can see here, ridership was dropping, and at the same time, our on-time performance was suffering and speed was getting worse. So we're not providing the service, we're not providing the service effectively, or there are factors that affect its performance that we're not really accounting for, and ridership is reacting, at the same time. Population's changing, people are moving around, people's employment patterns are changing. Center City, Philadelphia, which always has been sort of the biggest regional employer and still is, that has changed. That has become, residential development has really taken off in Center City, Philadelphia, but like the job market is pretty stagnant. So a lot of people moving in are students or they're empty nesters, and they walk to work or they don't work. So I think that there's just a lot of things that we're not paying attention to, and this project was sort of let's really take a step back and figure out what's going on. So we do have to bring up COVID, and I know that was in the description, but something that happened, and this map shows, right before COVID, it shows you the sort of low point of COVID, the low point on the graph, and then it shows you how we've responded up till January. So this is a little bit dated, and we have rebounded even more since then. But as you can imagine, our ridership fell off a cliff with COVID, particularly last spring when everybody was staying at home because we were supposed to, and because very few people were traveling. If you were traveling, you were only traveling if you had to, and so our ridership totally fell off a cliff. And it has slowly started to rebound. So this graph shows you that we'd rebounded to about 38% in February. We're closer to 50% now, which is great. We definitely see it on our buses. We definitely hear it from our operators, but it's still half of what it was pre-COVID. And I do think that it's probably worth thinking about what the long-term outlook is here. We don't expect ridership to rebound to pre-COVID levels, anytime soon. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality we're living in. And I don't think that's, I think normalcy is a moving target, I guess is the way to look at it. Like, we're not sure what's going to happen. Things seem to have quieted a little bit, regarding the Delta variant, but we're hopeful that we're sort of on an upward trajectory now, and that, we'll continue to rebound, little by little over the coming months. But I've talked to a lot of people that work in Center City or work in University City, and they're still not planning on coming back until next year. So there's still a lot of different things that we have to account for, and things we're going to have to monitor over the next couple of years. So something that is also worth noting, and I think there's two slides that deal with this, is that since the pandemic, the ridership, the way people are using the system is changing a little bit. So pre-COVID, a lot of our ridership was geared towards like traditional AM and PM commute time. So 6 a.m. to 8, 9 o'clock, and then 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So that was when our ridership was highest, as when we had the most intense levels of service. And that's pretty typical. And that's just that's how things work. Most trips are commute related. Most people only travel when they go to work or when they come home from work. So that's just the reality of the business, and that's how traffic works, et cetera. However, since the pandemic, ridership has become less peak oriented, and you can see here, and this is a little dated, and I think our ridership is a little more peaky now, but it's still, what you're seeing is flatter demand throughout the day, which is it's different, and it also means that it allows us to think about how we provide service. Like, we always provide very heavy peak service and less service in the middle day. There are benefits to doing that, but there are also demands. And if we can stop doing that, it opens up the opportunity to provide service, more steady service throughout the day, and potentially on the weekend as well. And on to weekend service, ridership declines on the weekend were less than during the week. I think that's partially because there's a lot more weekday ridership to lose, but even on a percentage level, weekend ridership stayed, a little bit stronger. And I think that's because the people using the system are not traditional 9 to 5 commuters. They're not people traveling, during the peak. They're not necessarily working in offices. They're working different shifts. They're working service jobs. They're working at different times. They're also just traveling at different times. They're using the system for other purposes. So that allows us to sort of look at our system and say, well, what if this trend continues? What does that mean on how does that affect how we plan and run service? So this is, I only have like 1 or 2 slides left, then I'm happy to open it up for some questions. So early findings from our network, state of the system, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. For strengths, spans, for a lot of our routes, particularly many in the city, we run really late into the night. We have a lot of AL routes that run overnight. Service area coverage, we generally do provide good service throughout the region. Maybe not good, but we provide service throughout the region. We are an authority that reports, has a 5-county board. We do respect that, and it's important important to us that we provide service that the counties approve of and support and are interested in, having us continue to do well. And then service frequency, again, this is a city thing more than anything else, but we do provide pretty steady frequency in many parts of the city and even parts of the suburbs like Lower Delaware County, where there is a higher propensity for transit use. Some weaknesses: our speeds are really slow. They're not the slowest in the country, but they're amongst the slowest in the country. 8-10 miles an hour in the city. We do run faster in the suburbs, as you can imagine, but overall operating speeds on our heaviest routes are pretty poor. Bus stop spacing: our stops are close. In the country, our stops are closest together of any transit agency. The average city block is 550 feet. We have some routes where the stop spacing is less than that. This is something that we need to fix. It's not such a big deal it's not such a problem in the suburbs where there's not always strong pedestrian infrastructure to facilitate people walking between stops, but it's something that we're going to be looking at on all of our routes to make sure the bus stops are well spaced and clearly marked and that kind of thing. We have a lot of route alignments that are complicated. There's a lot of turns. There's a lot of, there's a lot of things that are not necessarily logical to the customer who maybe want to travel along a single direct corridor. We have a lot of patterns, and what that means is essentially routes are trying to do many different things. They have multiple, they end at multiple points. Sometimes they turn right on a street, sometimes they turn left on a street. This is not always clear to customers. It's not even always clear to operators, and it's something that we've identified as a particular weakness. We also have a lot of route duplication and competition. We have routes that are running really close to each other. Sometimes they run on the same roadways. They're going to similar places. They kind of steal ridership from each other. In the name of access and convenience, which are great and important, but for a transit agency of our size, we probably have too much of it. And our on-time performance is really poor. Our schedule adherence is poor. And we want to figure out ways to improve those. And we think some of those things can be improved by working on the sort of weaknesses above that. Opportunities we've identified: straighter, more direct routes that go to sort of higher pull destinations, sort of straight, clearly marked, fewer service patterns and fewer stops. We want to focus service investment. We want to create a service hierarchy. We want to make sure that we invest in key corridors with our partners, and we adjust frequency based on that. We want to identify what the key corridors are in the city and the region and emphasize those. And then we want to create stronger partnerships with our counties. We understand that there are lots of different aspects of things that counties don't control. A lot of times they're left to municipal control, but we want to make sure that we have strong partners in sort of the municipal and the county world who we can work together on intersection control projects, traffic priority treatments, and corridor treatments. Really quickly, just one more slide about fall engagement. I think this is the last one. Like I said, we're right in the middle of our sort of big push for fall engagement. We started not this past Friday, but the Friday before that with a pop-up event at Frankfurt Transportation Center, where we have about 10 more of those, or 8 or 9 more of those, at different transportation centers in busy locations in the region. I'm going to be at Norristown Transportation Center tonight. We're complementing those with a series of transit talks. The purpose of these events is to talk about transit trade-offs. It's talking about different aspects of different sort of things that impact service design, like would you walk further for faster service? It kind of seems simple, but at the same time, we need to take these things into consideration as we start developing scenarios and possible recommendations. So like I said, we have a series of transit talks. We have the next one on September 30th. You can register on our website. We also are going to be constantly updating our site with materials and activities. And we are also doing operator inreach. So yesterday I spent the entire day at one of our operating districts. We're reaching out to every single district. We're at a different one today. We'll be at ones on Wednesday and Thursday as well. So basically, operators are really crucial to SEPTA, obviously, and they're really crucial to the success of this project. So we're making sure they're fully aware of this project and engaged to the maximum possible extent. This is all leading to an official trade-off survey, which we're going to kick off in early October, and it'll run basically through the month. And this will be, again, this is going to be focused on these transit trade-off questions, and it'll be done through a market research firm, and you know, we will be sharing all of that material up online sort of later in the year. That's it. You know, I really appreciate you guys having me out today. You know, you can, like I said, you can find more information on our website at septabusrevolution.com. There, we do have a little trade-off exercise there if you're so inclined. You can register for a transit talk. You can see where the different pop-ups are if one is convenient to you. And you can always email us. I think that's how you know, JP reached out to me initially, busnetwork@septa.org. I am on the other end of that email, so I will do my best to get back to you, you know, without much delay. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Thanks, Dan. This is Derek again. I do have about 8 people in the room here with me as part of the development partnership. And then we also have about 6 tuned in virtually. So if anybody virtually has any questions, I believe there's a raise hand feature or type in the chat. And if anybody here live has a question, I'll pass the speaker around. And thanks again, Dan. It's great information.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey Dan, my name is Troy. I was wondering when you're going to start working on the rail line.
Well, this project is focused on just the bus network. The regional rail master plan, I believe there's going to be a release going out this week about that project, so stay tuned for that. So if that's where you're primarily interested, and also you can go to, or I'll type it into the chat here. There's going to be a little more information about that coming forward on septa.planning.org. So I'm only sort of tangentially involved in that project, but if that's what if you want to find out more, I'd go to planning.septa.org and sort of figure out where that project is going to sort of fall and how you can get involved with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Dan.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I just see his chat in here from Jackie saying, can we get a copy of the slides, please?
Yeah.
I do have this presentation from you, Dan. Is it okay if we share that with everyone?
Can I just I had made like some last minute changes, so can I just send you, after we're done, I'll send it to you and then you can send it out.
Sure. Yeah, so once we get those revised ones, we can, we have everyone's information who's here. We can share that out.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Dan, it's JP. First of all, thank you very much for doing this. Lots of really good information. You had mentioned something that I notice on my commute in to work every morning. I come down Horsham Road here, and there's a large section that doesn't have a sidewalk. And you had mentioned infrastructure and working with communities. I take it can I assume you're working with something like PennDOT to see as PennDOT roads get renovated and townships that we can actually add sidewalks and maybe bike lanes as well?
Yeah, so PennDOT is on the project advisory committee. I mean, we often do get involved in those projects, and I actually there is another SEPTA person who does significant amounts of work in the suburbs here, Mark Castle, and I see him frantically typing into the box. But we do get involved with PennDOT Connects projects and other types of projects where we do advocate for bus stops and bus stop infrastructure when we can. So yeah, we do get involved. I think this project, the whole that's a good, Mark brought up a good point here, is that PennDOT will only add a sidewalk if the municipality will accept maintenance responsibilities. And that's typical of PennDOT. They do the same thing with bike lanes. So, you know, if there is a situation where you're looking for pedestrian infrastructure, where there's pedestrian gaps, and that prevent people from sort of traveling safely by foot, I do think that's something that working, you know, as a municipality, working directly with PennDOT is probably the best way to go. And SEPTA will always be an advocate for those types of projects because good pedestrian infrastructure generally equals better transit.
And I had a quick follow-up. I'm noticing all of the buses have, you know, bike racks on the front to allow, you know, a rider to take their bike with them. Do you have an idea as to how much that is being utilized?
I don't know offhand. We can see if that that's monitored at all. Like, I don't believe they have any sensors on that equipment. But we can
Yeah.
ask around to see if that's monitored.
Just because, if we start getting into conversations about sidewalks and bike lanes, it'd be important to know how much, it's being utilized and people are hopping off the bus and grabbing their
Yeah.
bike and that last, quarter mile.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be important to know. Yeah.
That's exactly where it's at. All right, thanks, Dan.
All right, thank you.
So now, are you expecting to possibly expand the bus routes in the suburban areas?
We are, like I said, we're going to change them. What that change looks like, we haven't figured out yet. In terms of expansion, this is not an expansion project. We are working within our footprint. If we do expand, it will be because of funding becomes available or money makes itself available and we can expand. But within that, like, we are doing a comprehensive review. So we're going to make sure that the services are our goal is to get the services going to the right places, and providing better service overall. We're not removing any service, so we haven't figured out how this works generally, but we're going to keep the service hours the same in the county. So we're not going to take service from the counties and give it to the city and vice versa. So we're not going to shrink the footprint, but it's a pure reallocation. If we do have the opportunity to add service, we will, that'll be a separate, line item, I guess.
Well, my question for that is, as all of us know here, currently the bus runs from like Telford to the Montgomery Mall and then it stops. So, but we have people that need to get from there to the industrial places and all the way down part 309, which they're not getting to. How would we handle that as a group to request SEPTA to take a look at that?
Well, I think that, first of all, I would suggest writing that in to the project
Okay.
email so that we can track it. But
Okay.
I think that this is the situation, like, when we say reallocation, what we're essentially saying is we are going to take things that are not working and we are going to change, we are going to move, the best case scenario is that we can take things that are working poorly or not working at all and reallocate them to things that are working or creating new connections and new opportunities to sort of travel via bus. It's not that we're going to just sort of leave everything as is and add to it. It's that we are going to sort of move things around in a way that's more reflective of where things are now. That's sort of the overall goal of the project. Again, like how that works out in Montgomery Township specifically, I can't say because we haven't really, we haven't been diving into that. But if there are opportunities to create new connections and there is demand for it, this is the project in which we will use to identify those opportunities and try to create those connections. But like I said, it's a cost neutral project. It means those resources are coming from somewhere else.
Okay, because a lot of our restaurants are reaching out and saying, I can't get people in because they're not bussed up from Philly far enough to get to
Yeah.
us. And then I had the same situation where it stops at the mall.
Yeah.
So we'll put it in there and have
Yeah.
you take a look.
Yeah, no, definitely put it in there. And I think, like I said, like you can kind of see in that map that I had shown earlier that shows the adjusted population sort of combined with the employment density, the industry specific employment density. You can kind of see where those connections are needed, and then it's just about figuring out what the most effective way to make those connections are. Philadelphia is quite a long ways from where you are, so a single bus route that goes from Philadelphia to Montgomery Township is probably not going to happen, because I don't think the demand would be there. But creating a connection so that if you indeed are trying to pull city residents out there, creating an effective way to get them, whether it's from a transportation center or whether it's from a regional rail station potentially, although that's a trickier situation. That is sort of the connection we would look at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Hey, Dan,
sorry, so I just want Jackie just put in that the partnership TMA of Montco and Bucks is hosting us towards the end of October. So we'll probably have an updated presentation at that point because it's a month away. I would hope we have some stuff done by then. So we'll have another opportunity to talk then. So thanks, Jackie, for the reminder.
Hey, Dan, I know you guys were starting to look into this. You said before COVID and the pandemic broke out, correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, JP.
I was going to say, I wonder, just because there are so many aspects are shifting right now, work from home demographics and, people moving out of, firms moving out of the city and everyone's starting to work from home. I love the fact that you guys are being forward thinking, but is anyone thinking that maybe we're trying to hit a moving target because things haven't settled yet?
Yeah. I think that's a really excellent question. I'll say a couple things. The first is that I think that what you just brought up with firms relocating outside of the city, I think that's something that's been happening for a really long time. And that's one of the primary reasons that ridership has been dropping, is because Center City used to have sort of a real, like, it used to have a pretty big hold on, like the regional employment. It's just not there anymore. And that's one of the reasons that we started to look into this. I think that one of the things that we learned from early in COVID, though, is that the strongest parts of our system have stayed the strongest parts of our system. And a lot of those routes aren't necessarily in Center City. They're strong because of the urban neighborhoods that have high numbers of sort of transit dependent populations or people that are just using the system. Those parts of the region aren't changing. Where they're going may be changing. And that's really I think that's what you're kind of talking about, what was brought up before, and what I think it is a moving target. Normalcy is a moving target, or whatever we settle is a moving target. But I think we have a good feel for what's happening. I think what's happening is more localized trips, more certainly more outbound commute trips, and not so much focus on Center City as the magnet that it once was. And I think that just sort of that has been exacerbated. I feel what you say, though, and I think the best way to deal with that going forward is to just make sure that we are constantly we're constantly trying to improve the network. We're partnered with townships and counties so that we know what kind of developments are coming online. We know what kind of needs our partners have, and to see if we can fulfill them. I think early in the presentation, it's like transit works best when there are certain sort of factors, and density and sort of having transit, populations of people that are, typically use transit. However, I think what we want to make sure of is that we're connecting them to opportunities. And I think that's where I think these types of conversations come in, because, employment is shifting, employment is changing, but that's happening in the city as well. Northeast Philadelphia has become a huge, huge place for sort of warehousing and logistics. So you have people that are in the Northeast that are now, maybe we're commuting to, Center City or whatever. Now they're commuting in the Northeast, or they're commuting to Lower Bucks. So we're starting to see this kind of thing everywhere. And I think this project is this will get us, part of the way there. And then what will continue to get us all the way there is sort of, more iteration, more flexibility, being able to pivot faster and take advantage of, these types of organizations and these types of relationships. But I do agree. I do sort of understand the sentiment of your question, but I think to kind of get back to zero, we have to we'll do this project, and then from there, we'll sort of expand from there.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, Dan, it looks like we have no further questions on this end. Just give it a few seconds if anybody tuning in virtually has any questions to type in or raise their hand so we can unmute them. But if not, just wanted to thank you, Dan, for this excellent presentation. We're looking forward to receiving information from Jackie and the partnership TMA about the listening session. We'll share that out as well when it's available.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you all so much. I really had a great time and really feel free to reach out at any point. Happy to talk further and have a great day and a great week.
Thank you, Dan.